Good morning. Welcome to the first official episode of the ALG show. Insane. Oh my god. The first one of who knows how many. Our first guest is director and cinematographer Daniel Streety. He's someone I've worked with personally as a DP for many years and is someone who's worked with brands like Spotify, Rap Genius, and more recently Tinder. Today we talk about some recent projects he's been working on as well as his creative process. Without any further ado, let's get into it.
I've been doing so many different things, trying to find creative ways to stay busy, with the strike and everything going on, it's hard to find consistent work, especially narrative stuff.
What kind of work have you been doing? Has it all been the same, or has it been kind of a variety of things?
It's been mostly commercial work, I would say, has been my number one thing. Really trying to work with brands outside of, the film industry, outside of production companies that operate in the film industry. And, really just having fun in that lane. It's also been tough, I can't lie. Can't sit up in here and act like it's just been a whole bunch of work has been flowing in, because it really hasn't. But, it is what it is. You take the work when it's there, and you take the time to relax when it's there too. I know you probably feel that as well.
Yeah, I think in some sense I'm still navigating how to be productive in that off time, because I think a lot of times there's this pressure of you have to be always on. You got to be doing XYZ 100% of the time, and I think I'm still wanting to do stuff. I'm still wanting to do stuff in between projects. But I'm still figuring out what does that look like?
Yeah, what does that look like practically for you?
Like if that's going to be me actually genuinely just taking a step away from work, is that preparing for other things? That's something I wanted to ask you actually, because I'm personally having a harder time trying to think of things that I could do in the off time. Because there's this pressure of I got to be productive. I got to be doing XYZ, right? I'm wondering what do you do between projects? Because you said it's there's kind of gaps.
Yes, there definitely is gaps between projects. And what I do, honestly, is just write. Even if it's not writing a script, because I wouldn't consider myself a writer. I don't write many scripts, but if it's drawing out an idea, writing a treatment, doing anything, it all attributes to getting you back out there working. Like I said, I think we were talking earlier, it's all cumulative, all the work that you do. It all adds together. Even when you aren't working on stuff for brands or working with people, it's still adding to, how you sharpen your eye on each project, how you perceive things. So you have gear, just go out with your camera, why not? That's what I tell everybody. If you really have the gear, you have the opportunity to sharpen your eye every day. You don't need somebody hiring you to do that.
So is it always this sort of pursuit to pursue other ideas, essentially? It's you're kind of bouncing off of one project to the next one, and it feels like you're always kind of wanting to push towards the next thing.
Yes, because for me, it's not really about the job and money and that sort of thing. Of course, I do like money, and I would like to get certain jobs to get financial security. Who doesn't want that? But at the end of the day, I just love telling stories, and it's actually about filmmaking and the process. As long as I can still have the process by myself or with whoever, it doesn't matter who's hiring me. It's really about filmmaking. I love this. If I didn't get paid, if nobody got paid a dime for this, I would still do it.
What kind of stories would you make? In that context, assuming you were given no resources, this wasn't going towards anything, what kind of story what does that look like? What kind of story does that look like?
I mean, I would have to start with the stuff I know, which is just inner personalities, relationships, people, what motivates them, what people love to see, romanticism, just about regular. I feel like I'm good at that, just finding good things in small aspects. So, just stuff like that. No matter what, I will always be creating.
You direct and DP.
Yes.
We know this. We've worked together several times. Is that process different, like for each thing that you sort of do? Like, is the mindset of like directing, are those ideas? Is the thought process the same, or is it like two very different worlds?
Yeah. It's very different for me to approach projects as a director versus a DP. I feel like it really is like operates on a project to project basis, because you'd be surprised. Some directors really want you to kind of co-direct as a DP.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is a position that you get in sometimes where they're asking you to make decisions that, maybe a DP typically doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it really depends on what role and what relationship you have with the director. And that really alters how I perceive working within each role, DP or director. But overall, I would say approaching directing is kind of like approaching things on a much more personal basis.
Mm-hmm.
And DPing is submitting to the fact that you aren't working on this on so much of a personal basis, that you're submitting to the vision of the whole production.
Personally, with my own relationships with directors, I feel like, I'm going into this thing that feels very intimate, especially if it's like a narrative project or short film, whatever it is, because I understand that it to some extent, the director connects to this in a certain way. Do you feel like you have a hard time, say you're going from like you directing one project to another project, do you find it harder to like jump between the two? Because I understand there's like an emotional weight to everything, right? Can you disconnect very easily and just kind of snap to one project, or is it still like you like to take a minute to just like chill and like before you get into like another short film or something?
I mean, I honestly operate kind of all over the place. I feel like that as well. I'm always working on multiple things at once. So I'd say it is kind of easy for me to adapt and like just kind of switch, go chameleon mode, and just do different projects at once. Just because I like it like that. Like, it stays interesting. And it's funny because you could really see what inspires me in certain periods of time, and it bleeds out into multiple projects. And then you can see through periods of time, like, oh, he was just working on that at the same time. That's why it kind of looks like that.
Yeah.
Like, like we had a whole, like, 6 months where, like, almost everything was in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, because I was just in that mode,
Yeah.
It's like, that's just how it ends up working out.
So you kind of sit in certain waves, kind of with ideas.
Yes, because I've accepted the fact that I'm not the type of person to sit down and do anything for a long period of time. So instead of shooting myself in the foot and still trying to sit down and do things for long periods of time, I just do what's interesting. Like, so different projects are interesting at different times. So I'm working on different ones.
Mm.
It's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's like a special thing or if it's just like an ADHD hack.
Sure. No, I think it's just the way people operate. Me personally, again, because I don't direct, I don't have that sort of intimate relationship with the project. It's easier for me to kind of bounce from like, okay, cool, I'm doing a project with Sriti, and then I'm going to another director and I'm doing a music video. For me, it's easier to disconnect because I'm not as attached to it. I think for you to be able to kind of bounce back and forth is really interesting because it allows you to kind of like, okay, let me separate from this project and let me go into this mode for a second. Because also like you DP.
Mm-hmm.
So like I understand like in some sense like you have to disconnect a little bit.
Yeah, you have to be detached and not too caught up in your own ideas and ego. I mean, even when you direct as well. But yeah, that is definitely an aspect of DP, and that has to be on 10.
Do you think it affects the work at all? Like
What,
being semi-detached in a way? Or do you find that's just like a healthy boundary to have with it?
I feel like detachment overall can be good and can be used as a tool for awareness about the project. But I would say that, it also can be bad when filmmaking, especially being like someone that does their own projects and produces a little bit sometimes. it is a little saddening to see your crew detached.
Mm.
Like, I know some people are here for money, some people are here to do certain things and work. But when you could tell that people in the crew don't actually like care about what's happening creatively, that it's just another day to them, you kind of feel like, damn, what are we doing here? I thought this was filmmaking. But I get it, because I've been on that side of it too, where I work all the time, just about every other day, where I'm like, gosh, when is this over? Like, I don't want to do this. But it's like, yeah, it's just a lot sometimes.
Yeah, and I know with I can give you a specific example actually. With But the Flesh is Weak, I know that was a very personal project we did, and I couldn't imagine like you trying to step away from that like 2 days later trying to DP something. I know if I was in your shoes, I couldn't.
Oh yeah, definitely not at that time either. I could have done something like that a few years ago, because that was just like totally different. And even that weekend, we were being pushed hard because we had to do the short film, But the Flesh is Weak, and we shot Centipede that same weekend as well. So we doubled down, did 85% of a short film in a 12-hour day, and then had another 12-hour day for a music video back to back. That was kind of a marathon.
That was a marathon. I remember that because it was like we had, was it like a month and a half of pre-production?
Yes.
Just like getting ready for those 2 days. And I like, me personally, I guess I've never spoken to you about this. I was kind of stressed because of the scale of production. Right. It was our first time working with Ari.
Yes, that's a whole new workflow.
Yeah. And it was our first time sort of having to balance, again, kind of having to switch modes between like a short film and then back to a music video and then back to a short film later in the day because we needed to catch some sunset shots.
Oh, I forgot about that. We had to double back and do the...
Yeah. Yeah, so I can't imagine... If for myself, just thinking about where I was mentally, I was just like, damn, I can't even imagine the mental stress and turmoil that you were in.
Yeah, it was very stressful. One thing that I'm reminded of that was super stressful was when we were shooting the beach scene,
mm-hmm.
and we had like 30 minutes left of available sunlight, and we had the beefiest like dialogue to cover.
Yeah,
and we were also running out of media.
We were on the last card. I think we had like probably around 10 minutes on it. Because we were shooting Ari Raw.
Oh my goodness, that was...
We were shooting Ari, for context, we were shooting Ari Raw on a 256 gigabyte card in, was it 2.8K, I think? I think we ended up doing the lower resolution, 2.8K Ari Raw on a 256 card. Maybe like 10 minutes at that point. And, I remember, I don't know if you knew about this, we were on our last gold mount.
Oh my gosh. Wow, so that was crazy. There were like so many elements going against us.
The stars had to align.
Yeah. And I was going in full like 2-minute offense mode, like, all right, let's get this shot. Hike. Like, oh, let's get this shot. Let's do that. All right, reset. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it's just like the stressfulness, like, but I had a good crew behind me. Like, we got carried, had a good camera crew. Shout out JoJo, ADing. Shout out Ryan and Ray producing. It was just overall like a good thing. Like, we really got it done.
I can always look back at that and think that it was a positive experience because, yes, it was a lot of stress, but it was also like we were challenged in sort of a new way, especially at that time. And it was also, what was it, like the thick of COVID kind of?
Yeah, it was right in the middle of COVID.
So like we were still figuring out like what productions were going to look like, and that was a whole thing. And I couldn't imagine that sort of turmoil for you mentally because you're also like having to balance a million different people asking you questions and also just that intimacy with the project of like having to be this man who's vulnerable kind of for the first time in his life, and you having to connect with that project in a different way that I'll never be able to experience. So I can imagine like what now that I'm here, what was that like to try and navigate both of those things? Was that a lot? Was it like, I can kind of bounce between these two different schools of thought, or was it like Or did you have to step back and you're like, I can't do this? Like,
It took a lot of patience because when I first read the script, it was hard for me to understand from the character's perspective because a lot of the stuff that Mylan had did, it isn't something that I've done personally, but I could still reconcile with the fact that, he's a person that's done wrong to people and he's trying to be vulnerable about it, but he doesn't know how. And, being somebody that's dealt with various mental health issues over the years, I definitely registered with that school of thought. So it was very easy for me to channel the path for Alex to take. Alex Barless, our main actor.
I was like, me? When did I do this?
Like, no, my man Alex B, the main actor, he held it down. And it was really just talking to him. And it was honestly written so well. It was written by Ava. And just getting that woman perspective and hearing her talk about how this is how you men sound. This is how crazy you guys sound when you're ranting, when you're doing this. It was just humbling to hear her testimony through the script. And yeah, it was, like I said, it was just easy to resonate with it, being an emotional person myself.
So, talking about mental health, how do you navigate it in this industry? Because we have long ass days sometimes. We're spending a lot of time away from family, partners, all that sort of thing, and especially you who directs, you're kind of emotionally investing yourself in kind of a variety of things. Like I'm wondering, like, from that experience, from having had that emotional intimacy with this sort of story, do you now, like, how do I phrase this? It's like, do you now sort of approach your own mental health in a different way? Are you like kind of just in the midst of like, okay, as long as I'm preoccupied with something, I'll be okay?
I can't sit here and act like I am navigating it very well, like perfectly per se, because I do have my mishaps. I do have my very stressful days where shit is just hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
But as I grow into myself and this thing of ours, I learned that through like meditation, practicing detachment, praying, whatever spiritual practice you have, leaning into that and giving space for you to do those things is very valuable, at least for me. I can attest to, like, it's also about managing your time. As artists, we always feel like managing our time in a way doesn't be free-flowing with God and nature and things, but I found that setting time aside for every task that you want to do, even if it's relaxing, is enough.
Mm-hmm. Define what is relaxing? Because to me, that's a very different experience. To me, relaxing is going to the gym. You know what I mean? Like what is that? Do you go to the gym? Do you like?
Yeah, I definitely do. As separate time, or else I feel like I'll never separate it for myself. Like.
Yeah, for me, the gym is very sacred. Like I have my Apple Watch, and
I need that.
I have other people tracking my activity, so it's like I kind of in a sense I have to be accountable, because there's times where like I'm in the thick of a project, and like maybe in the moment I feel that there's no opportunity to take a space, but I do kind of the Google Calendar thing where it's like because it's in the calendar and because it's on the to-do list, I force myself to do it, even if in the moment like I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you do this with like meditation as well. I don't have that sort of
Yes.
practice, and I think I'll probably apply what you're saying in a sense. I don't know. I don't think for me it looks like meditation, but it's cool that like you have that outlet. You know what I mean? And I'm asking because I'm also still figuring out like what is a healthy outlet. I think the gym has been a very positive one.
Yeah, the gym is probably like a top healthy outlet
Yeah.
for like dealing with mental health for sure.
Yeah, it's been pretty helpful.
Cooking,
Cooking.
yes.
What do you cook? What do you make?
Bro, I've been cooking steaks. Like, I've been going crazy just cooking absolutely everything. And it's like, it's something that is good for you on multiple aspects. Sensory, it smells good. It looks good. It feels good cooking. But on a more basic level, like, yo, you're making a decision to take care of yourself.
And I'd make the argument that it's a very intimate process as well.
Yes, it is very intimate. And you learn, like, every time you do it. So, yeah, that's definitely a mental health. I call these things, okay, because there's PMA, right, which is positive mental attitude.
Mm.
And you can think yourself into a positive mental attitude for sure. But you can also act yourself into a positive mental attitude.
Mm.
So, in the process of doing actions and habits that you know are good for you, you hack your mental health. We always think, oh, I feel so shitty and depressed right now. How am I going to help myself? I can't even think to want to do anything. So it's hard to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you choose to do stuff regardless, you're setting yourself up to not be depressed.
So by prioritizing those things like cooking and like going to the gym, it's like easier to kind of bounce between projects essentially.
Yes, it's easier to bounce between projects. It's easier to just flow throughout life.
Yeah.
Because you know that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And you have reinforcements of you doing that every single day. You have positive reinforcements from your actions instead of guesses that you think you should treat yourself better.
Mm.
You have a playbook of this is how well I treated myself, regardless of what I'm going through.
Mm. I'm definitely going to take away some stuff from that because, like,
that's a bar right there. I ain't going to hold you. That's a bar.
Like, I sort of have my knacks where I'm just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym because I know it's healthy for me or like it's a cool opportunity to be able to just, like, step away from the mayhem of a project sometimes because it's like you're having to answer to what feels like a million different people sometimes. And I think, yes, the gym is healthy and positive, but I like the idea of what you're saying of like having this overall sort of like self-care sort of a lifestyle. And I would love to implement that more. I'm gonna steal some shit from you. Like I'm gonna try cooking some basic.
Man, I ain't gonna lie, I'm a self-care.
Self-care, I think, is a good thing to be. You could be.
That is a really good point because I spent my whole life trying to get here to where, like, even stuff I do now I would have never thought I would have done in my life. Like, little stuff like washing my face every night, like sunscreen, like, I don't know.
But a lot of it's a lot of things that they're cumulative. And I think because you have this sort of regimen of like I'm going to do, I don't know how many things it is, but it's like because you have like, let's say 6 things that you do for self-care, it builds up and it gives you this opportunity to kind of decompress from projects. And I think that's really cool. And I admire that. Because, for me, like what you're saying earlier, there's this pressure of us as creative individuals to always kind of be moving and sort of be in the motion of creating. And I think at the same time it's also good to actively be creating because you don't want to ever not be stagnant or be sort of repeating ideas. But I think it's important to kind of have that self-care routine. And I'm gonna steal a lot of shit from you. I'm gonna try cooking a meal. I'm gonna cook myself like even if it's something basic. I'm just gonna like I want to get into the rhythm of that and kind of like give myself that chance to decompress as well. And I think it's really cool that you're able to do that.
Thanks, bro.
I wanted to kind of bounce back to sort of that mental health vein of thought. Do you find that it's harder? Obviously, when you're in a rhythm of projects, right? You know kind of like what your month looks like, what your day looks like, what your week looks like, and you're able to manage that pretty well. Do you find it harder to sort of maintain that same sort of routine of like self-care when it's a project that's maybe more taxing? Maybe it's like a bigger budget that you haven't worked with before. This fear and this sort of new level of work, do you sort of feel like you're not able to maintain that sort of self-care routine? Do you sort of move in a different way that's a little bit more comfortable, or is this like sort of a school of thought that you've always maintained from like smaller scale projects going into bigger ones?
I've definitely struggled with that before, letting the pressure of a project like take me out of my routine, and because the nature of the business is very taxing on you time wise. Like, you very well could be in pre-production meetings, to tech scouts, to shoots, to, I got to dump this footage, I got to check on this gear. Like, you could really be wrapped up in a project to where you physically cannot go to the gym. Like, that's happened to me before, where, like, it's not a choice by me. Like, it's not anything that I've been doing. It's I physically have no time to go to the gym. And, yeah, it's just due to some projects just, trying to set yourself up for success. You want to get called back by these people. You want to be that reliable source. You don't want to be the person that gives up so easily behind the scenes. So you want to show these producers that you can do your shit. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah. And has there ever been a situation where you've been like, I can't do this?
Yes, I've been learning to say no a lot more now, where I try to evaluate where I'm at mentally, and I genuinely feel like this is going to take more out of me in the long run than this little bit of money for this project that I would get right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like approaching these projects as something so transactional isn't really the way to go about it either. I think us slowing down, saying yes to the right things, can open up that big project that's going to be 10x. Mm-hmm. Then you need 10 less projects, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's just about moving different.
Say you're in kind of the thick of a project and you're under this intense mental stress. Does this sort of take away from the experiences on passion projects? Like, do you now sort of approach the passion projects a little bit differently, or is it just purely the love of whatever it is that sort of drives you through it, regardless of the stresses that you deal with?
I mean, I'm sure there is some carryover that I can't even recognize myself because I'm not 100% fully aware. Awareness is something I work on all the time. But I do still feel just a nice charismatic spark to approach passion projects regardless of how stressed I am with other stuff, because a lot of these really stressful jobs aren't that creatively fulfilling anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm still searching for that outside of it,
mm-hmm. What is that like compassion look like? Like, say you were to apply that to like a short film, for example. Like, what is, define compassion for me as like a director, for example?
I would say it's just approaching things with a level of humility that allows a maximum channel of collaboration between the whole crew. Mm-hmm. So it's really about submitting your ego to the project and just getting the best out of everyone around you. Having that lust for life and having that childlike enthusiasm towards the project can like lead and inspire others when you're directing so much. So that compassion is a big part, because it's like, if the director doesn't care, why the hell should I? I just worked 12 hours, I got to do this. That's what half the crew is thinking. But if the director shows up on set and he's loving every aspect of it, he's asking people how their day was, he's lifting up people, there's a chance that, if the director is, there's a very high chance that the director is somebody that is lifting people up on set and, is trying to create an environment that is good. And that's what I try to be as much as possible. I have my snappy moments, but I wouldn't be who I am if I wasn't snappy sometimes. You have to be, you have to be a little crazy at times in order for stuff to work. That's the silver lining. So basically, I'm saying just do whatever the fuck you want. Just do crazy shit. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, so define what do you mean crazy?
You have to take risks on set, and that's what I learned from J Visuals. He told me, if you always just play it too safe and you go with the status quo every time, you can't really grow. You got to lean into the mistakes. Lean into a margin of error sometimes, create mayhem, push people a little further than they may like to be pushed in a moment, and it may cause issues, but overall, you still tried it, and you still tried to better the project. So there is a villainous aspect of directing as well, where you feel like the Joker a little bit, my father was a drinker. I'm about to create a chaotic environment, just to add some spunk, some spice.
Kind of as a form of inspiration.
Yes. And a form of stepping out of the norm. Because, like I said, complacency is the last thing you want on set. You don't want people to feel like this is the same as the 5th set I've been on today. This is the same as the 5th set I've been on this month.
Yeah.
This is just another day at work. No, I want the set experience with me to feel unique, too.
I definitely feel that. Because there's always, like what you're saying, I feel like just because of our relationship as director DP, I feel like there's this opportunity to sort of experiment and kind of take someone I'm working with with each director and sort of the comfort zone that I have with them and I want them to kind of what you're saying, use the DP as a vessel to sort of say these different ideas and to sort of convey what it is they're trying to express in a project. And I value that. And again, definitely having that environment just to showcase that idea alone, I think has been really instrumental to my process with you, for example. And I think it's what allowed us to sort of make something like Centipede, because that was sort of an experimentation of a visualizer, of a thought process of a man who's dealing with all this emotional intimacy and vulnerability and turmoil in a sense. And in that process, definitely I felt I had to kind of sit for a second and kind of think, okay, what is he trying to say with this? And I think it came across. I think so. But again, because you fostered this environment of okay, Alex, let's try this different idea, or maybe we shouldn't go with this, or maybe, definitely was pushed for sure on that specific instance. But I think in turn it's allowed for I want to understand where it is you're coming from, and you're, what am I trying to say? You can only articulate the idea so much, and I kind of have to fill in the gaps. For In Denial, it was different in the sense that we had a pretty heavy framework because we had a storyboard set up. It allowed me to kind of go in and say, okay, we have the foundation. We don't have to worry about that. We can just sort of create within the confounds of this idea. And we had to get whatever it was. I think it was 15, 20 shots. And because, you set up this framework, I was okay, cool. Now we have this amount of time to experiment. And I think you even told me yourself, it's you sort of set it up to where we had the time to sort of experiment with a specific shot, I think it was.
Yes, it was the crane. I had scheduled specifically around with crane time.
That's what you called it.
Yeah, it was because we hadn't really worked with the crane that much previously, And like the producers and the label kept asking me like, yo, so what exactly are you guys gonna do with the crane? And I'm like, I don't know, get a few shots, we'll figure it out when we get there. Like
I had maybe worked with a jib maybe like twice before, but it was sort of like, again, because it was like a premeditated idea, we sort of had like an intention for it. But I think because you gave the opportunity to just to say like, oh, I don't know, let's figure it out. We have this guy for however long you had him on the call sheet, and let's do it. I was like,
yeah,
cool.
And we budgeted for his time, which was like a specific set of hours. So we were like, okay, we'll have this time where we get the stuff that we set out to get with the crane, and then we will literally have fuck around time with the crane.
Yeah.
And during that time, you know, we learned a lot about the characteristics of the crane. There were some shots that were really dope that never made the project, the final cut, but are still just like really dope shots that I don't even think Alex has seen what I'm thinking of.
Are you thinking of the what was it? It's the high angle one.
Oh yeah, that
wasn't on the crane, but it was like on a ladder with a hi-hat. I don't remember 100% of the idea because this was like almost a year ago at this point. Yeah, I remember that.
The match, yeah, the whole thing was, it was like a high angle, and we were trying to show him move through time. So it was like he was at different places in the frame. It would like cross dissolve to one, then cross dissolve to another, cross dissolve to another. But yeah, it ended up just really not working within the cut. I tried to work it in. It's actually in the first rough cut.
I think I remember that. I remember seeing it in the first version. And I thought it was really interesting. I was like, okay, cool. Like this is where he wanted to take the idea. Obviously, me in the moment, I'm only referencing the storyboard, so I can only understand so much of the idea. I'm like, okay, where's he going to take this? Like, I understand this is going to be a series, and he's going to kind of do a few different things. Cool. This makes sense in the context of the idea that he's trying to execute. So I kind of thought nothing of it, and then I saw it in the cut, and I was like, oh, I see where he's going to take it.
Yeah, and then we determined that, like, in the editing bay, that we were too focused on executing ideas and less on, like, letting Ja's performance, like, really bleed through.
Mm-hmm.
So it came down to cutting it down, actually. I had so many more elements in the cut that were, like, flashy, like, oh, he's cross-dissolving through here, he's moving through time, this sort of thing. But then we realized, like, the project didn't really call for that. And what we ended up with was a still pretty expressionalist piece. It still has some, like, you know, some, like, what are they actually getting at here aspect of it. But overall, it's not too far left. It still is, you know, mostly a performance music video.
Yeah, I'm definitely... I look back at that project every so often. I'm like, oh, I'm very happy with this.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that as well, and what we wanted to do with it, and what really inspired that project itself during that time. You know, we were just really in a big black and white mode.
It was my first black and white project,
mm-hmm.
and I was definitely intimidated by it because I wasn't sure if I would execute in the way that it needed to. And it sort of taught me a lot about where I wanted to sort of shape shadows and where I sort of wanted to have the light pattern be. And I was more focused on, like, the quality of light versus the quality and, like, the shape of the light versus kind of above, like, the color and sort of what his skin looked like. Are we sort of are my shadows on the floor, you know, that sort of thing. And I think to this day I always think it's a really interesting project, always to look back on and
yeah, it's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah,
cinematography was dope. You crushed it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really like a matter of, like, the only, like, big cinematography note I remember having was just contrast.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, want this to be, like, heavy contrast, you know, really drive up that film noir aspect, and you just took that shit and ran with it, You and Ifu, man, it's like crazy combination.
Yeah. I try to be very delicate with that process and sort of make sure that not only that we're executing in the idea that you've given, but also I value that intimacy between myself and the gaffer.
Yeah.
In this case, Ifu.
That's everything.
And it was important that we both understood the not only just like, hey, let's pump up the contrast, let's sort of make sure our shadows are this way, let's make sure our key is this quality of light, let's make sure we get this, not only from a technical perspective. I also wanted to make sure he understood that, like, hey, this is the perspective that I'm experiencing, and I wanted to make sure that it made sense to him, and that that he was also allowed to experiment in this noir world. And I think it came across.
Oh yeah,
It
created that world, because that's what the big thing was for me, was creating the world. If we could do that in pre-production, then we can create the parameters for collaboration on set to really define it. I like to create a texture around a short film, music video, how the world operates, and what I mean by how the world operates, I just mean, like, is this in black and white? Is it a film noir feeling? Is it one of our biggest inspos with that one was Tragedy of Macbeth.
Mm-hmm.
Just really that, like, otherworldly black and white, just ethereal almost look that I hadn't really seen prior to watching that film, actually. That was like a big inspo.
It's a great film.
And I was like, wow, the world that they created in this, we know that it isn't the real world. Like, stuff doesn't look like that. Like, the hallway isn't perfectly lit. The shapes aren't perfectly symmetrical. But it didn't matter because they committed to that vision of the world. So, smaller scale, let's apply that to a music video. And let's just create the style with the lighting and everything so locked in and so within these parameters that, it feels otherworldly. And I feel like that really came across.
I've always seen that. I think I've always seen, like, you wanting to sort of create this sort of world for different artists. It's always less of just like, oh, let's just shoot the video for the sake of a video. There's always, like, an artistry to it.
Yeah, I've always thought cinematically about music, so it's always been easy for me to, like, think of ways to apply it in, like, a bigger way schematically. Yeah, I just love doing that. Like, you don't even know half of the drafts of this stuff, or, like, the ideas of where we thought to take things. Like,
yeah,
I know even we've spoken about stuff for Ja, where it's, like, connecting in denial to, like, other things and kind of playing around with, like, multiple music videos within one. And I don't know, it's just really fun approaching it on a world basis and a project basis.
Do you think that music is sort of something that you always share intimately with a project? Like, is there sort of a school of thought in terms of music for, like, a short film, for example?
There's always music that gives me the inclination to create, and I'm definitely inspired heavily by music to create. One of the most monumental classes I had was music and film in college. My brief time during college. But it was dope just seeing how much music affects how we perceive film and stuff. And I've always just applied that, and, I've always just been heavily inspired by sounds. I don't know. It's just easy for me to visualize stuff based off sounds.
So it's more of a workflow thing than something that applies to a project directly. Like the score isn't something you're sort of intimately thinking about. It's more so like music can sort of inspire this school of thought and sort of get you in the zone of what it is that you're trying to say in a film or something.
Yes. Yes. And I've even gone to the extent, like for the spoken word that we've been working on, Bittersweet.
Mm-hmm.
I started with a playlist on Spotify actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 8 to 9 songs. Just portraying that very specific feeling of bittersweetness. And I spoke with the writer, and after hearing her poem, these were the songs that I came up with that best portrayed that. So, in the process of listening to that playlist, it created the framework for which the world of Bittersweet is created. So, yeah, we still got to finish shooting that thing, but I'm excited for more of it.
That concludes the very first episode of the ALG show. It's over already. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? It's over. Wow. Unbelievable. I'm so sad to see you guys go. Having worked with Shruti for several years, I've definitely always felt inspired by the work that he's done, along with the projects that we've done together. It's definitely a very open and creative process that I always have with him, and I definitely really appreciate it. Please feel free to check out his Instagram as well as his website in the show notes if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next show. Peace.